Back here, ready to do the live read. So we did 7, 8, 9, and 10 live read, and now we're about to do 11. Boy, oh boy, it's been busy and a lot of work, so I'll just be let's get right into it so we can get right into back into the story. 7, 8, 9, and 10. We're in Vava'u, where the history as it is written now. Finau's a Vava'u guy, and we have found out through these past 4 or 5 chapters why everybody believes that Finau is from Vava'u, but we know otherwise, right? As far as mariners concerned. Finau has taken over Vava'u from Neafu. The whole thing with Pupunu, Kakahu, and Naufahu, who were great warriors and great chiefs and strong men. The relationships, right? It seems like all the chiefs, whether it was from Hihifo or Tupo being related to who's the king that Finau and Tupo killed, right? Can't I think of his name right now? Anyways, down into Tupo and then down into Tupo first is Tupo's son. So Tupo must have been either very young. Yeah, he had to be very young. A little kid at this time. The king who ended up uniting Tonga under the protectorate of the British, the crown, and let me get this thing. Is it unlocked? Oh. Let me get something for this guy real quick.
What?
This guy.
Nope.
All right. Sorry for the interruption. All right. Okay. So much has happened, and now it seems like Vava'u is settling down and accepting. Well, they have no choice at this point but to accept Finau Ulukalala as their king, as their leader, the main chief in Vava'u now. Now that he has gotten rid of Pupunu, Naufahu, Kakaho. Kakaho is that crazy dude who had that one disease that made him not go out in public. And Kakahu, I think, was a character all in himself. So these are really cool little stories in between, right? Because I looked in the Google map, it's now Wallace and Futuna. Mariner's there, and he's saying Futuna and Lotuma, right? Those are the 2 islands, because you look on the Google map, and it's those 2 islands, Futuna and Wallace, or Wallace and Futuna. But the story that Mariner's telling at this time, it was Futuna and Lotuma. Now I looked up also, there's a Lotuma in Vava'u, small island in the middle there, and there's also a Rotuma in Fiji. So connecting those, whoever Lotuma was, must have been a great chief or a people or a last name or a group or whatever it was, that we still have those names here today. So anyways, so many things, so many parts of history. And I've also, a lot of people commented and is connecting stories or telling me stories about their family, how they're related to the Finaus, the Ulukalalas, the Tupos, the Popunus and whatnot. And all that's all gravy, right? And some of it is even corrective, like they're trying to correct my, reading of the book, but I'm just reading a book, you know what I'm saying? I'm just I'm basically just doing a book report just by reading straight out of the records of Mariner, and so a lot of it conflicts. A lot of this information conflicts with a lot of things that people have been telling me as far as their story and their storyline through passing it orally, oral history, which it was all good. That's all I believed growing up is oral history, right? But once I found this, it was like, oh, we have documentation of actually, firsthand experience. So let me check this out, and then checking this out corrected a whole bunch of stories that I've heard. So whether you like, the oral history, which are the stories get better and better, I'll tell you that much, because the real actual stories are more interesting to me. So anyways, we're right here in chapter 11, and we're going to go get right into it. And there's only 3 more chapters in this book, y'all, in this first volume anyway. The second volume is going to go through a whole bunch of logistics, right? The reason why and who, what, where, when, and why in the second volume. This is just to finish off the story. And I regretfully have taken, a while doing this. And even reading it again now, even now as I read it aloud and live, it reminds me of the things that I read the first time. But I wanted to do this read, so that we can get a live version of it, and then I'll edit it later into story mode type stuff. So, all right, let's see. Okay. Chapter 11, Kaumoala. Remember Kaumoala went to Fiji for, sandalwood. And Fiji had the best sandalwood, the scent, and they made oil out of it, which they still do today. They still make oils and, the sensual stuff out of sandalwood. Anyway, he went from Vava'u to Fiji, came back, and that's where he ended up in Futuna and Lotuma. But we'll get right back into it. Soon after Kaumoala's arrival from the Fiji Islands, Fina received intelligence from Tupo To'a, chief of the Hawaii Islands now, that a canoe had arrived at Lifuka from the island of Tonga with a chief and 2 young matapules. They came to petition Finau for pardon in behalf of a great chief named Tupo Malohi, elder brother of Tupo To'a. Okay. Tupo To'a has an older brother named Tupo Malohi. Let's go. Who had been long resident at the island of Tonga and had defended the cause of Finau's enemies. So Finau's enemies, Tupo Malohi was on their side against Finau. As his chief brought very interesting information of all the recent events at the island of Tonga, we shall give an account of these transactions in the order in which they happened and conclude with the ceremony of pardon granted to Tupo Malohi and his followers. All right, so they came to petition Finau for pardon in behalf of Chief Tupo Malohi. All right, Tupo Malohi sent some guys over there. Hey, you guys go over there, go to Finau, and tell him that I'm begging his pardon, right? And it seemed like he would. I'm guessing that he's going to. Because this is Tupo To'a's older brother, Tupo Malohi. Remember we talked about the chiefs and the higher-ups, the Akis, the Matapules, their title or their names, their last names, as we would call it, would be in the front of their names, right? So all these Finaus, you got Finau Ulukalala, and his dad was Finau Maufanga, and his uncle was Finau Fisi, right? Same thing with this. You got Tupo To'a, who's now friends with Finau Ulukalala, who killed Tupo Niwa, right? So Tupo Niwa must have been related to these Tupos too, which is kind of weird, right? But we also know that the family, like this is some Game of Thrones type, family and power and those type of movements. Because if that's the case and Tupo Niwa is related to Tupo To'a, then Tupo Niwa killed his uncle, what's his name? Tuku'aho. That's his name. Tuku'aho, right? That's just a theory, though. trying to connect the dots. Tupo Malohi had been chief of the fortress of Nualofa on the island of Tonga, which the reader will recollect. Finau besieged with the 4 carronades and afterwards burnt to the ground. Yeah, we remember that, right? They all went with the palangis. The palangis manned the guns and the cannons in Nualofa, right? They fired into Nualofa, and then after they were done, Mariner said it was like 7 hours, they fired guns and cannons into Nualofa, and they went inside, and Finau walked through there, and Mariner said that Finau felt sick to his stomach just looking around and seeing what the guns did to the bodies. Arms, legs of men, women, and children, baby parts, you know. And because the next time they fought, when they went, after they used the guns for the last times in Vava'u, finally, Finau told Mariner, put all the guns away. This isn't us. This isn't how we fight. This isn't how we do things. We're going to go man to man, right? And that's why the Tupo family is in rule in the palace today, where Mariner is saying if Finau continued his conquest throughout Tonga, the Finau family would probably be in the palace. It's just a theory. But I also know that Finau wasn't, you know, just through our studies, that Finau wasn't, that he was treacherous, and he always had some scheme, right? He was always plotting. Where I'm grateful for Tupo, Vava'u, the Tupo the first, because he was actually a peaceful guy, it seemed like, because he brought them all together. So Tupo To'a is on Finau's team. Tupo To'a was running Nukunuku at the time Finau went and attacked it. Interesting. So Tupo Malohi was running Nukunuku. So Tupo Malohi and his men ran out the back of Nukunuku. If you remember, a lot of escaped through the back and went to Pea. Pea is where what's his name? Takai was, right? And then we find out that Takai had a missing left eye, because Finau tells Mariner to write down Takai has a missing left eye, or he's blind in his left eye. And find out a little bit more of that. So we're just connecting as we read as well, right? Okay, let's see. In consequence of which, Tupo Malohi left it with such of his followers as could save themselves and fled up the country to seek refuge in some other fortress. This chief had always been unfortunate. At the time of the great revolution of Tonga and the early success of Finau, he had fled to the Fiji Islands with his followers and had resided there some time, gaining experience in the art of war. So while Finau and them were attacking Nualofa, Tupo Malohi, saying Tupo Malohi, Tupo To'a's older brother, took his guys and they went to Fiji to go train in war, in battle, right? On his return to Tonga, he built the fortress of Nualofa, from which he was driven as already related. He next took refuge. Oh, so he went and trained in Fiji before he got taken. He next took refuge in some other fortress, from which, owing to the jealousy of the chief or some other cause, he was obliged to depart and seek shelter in a third, whence also he was exiled by some untoward circumstances, and became, in fact, a wanderer whom nobody would receive in a sincere and friendly way. So he's sounding like Fredo. Tupo Malohi is sounding like Fredo right now from The Godfather, right? Because Michael was the younger brother, but he became the Godfather. He became the Don. He became the boss. Tupo Malohi, it seems like he gave him, he went to Fiji, trained there, came, he got Nualofa. Nualofa got taken, and because he escaped and went to another fortress, those fortress guys, in my mind, I'm thinking, because he ran away from Nualofa and left his people to die there, we're not going to respect him like we should respect a chief or a king. Tupo Malohi abandoned his people over there, right? And so they're saying he left Nualofa, went to a second fortress. Second fortress didn't treat him right, or they whatever, hated on him, and then he had to go to a third fortress, right? So it seems like they're hating on him because he's a coward. This is what it would sound like they're treating him that way anyway, right? At length, however, he thought he found a permanent asylum in the fortress of Hihifo with Kava. That's the guy's name. Kava, Hihifo chief, Kava. The chief who had made Finau a present of the extraordinary well-trained bird. Kava is the Hihifo chief that Finau got his kalai from, right? So Tupo Malohi went to go team up with him. Kava received him and his followers in a very cordial manner, considering them a great acquisition to his strength. So Kava took him in as help, as more numbers in his army. For they had the reputation of being all great warriors, well schooled in the military practices of Fiji. There we go. Fiji's always popping up. When we're talking about war and war, right, tools, whether it's bow and arrows or spears and stuff, Fiji keeps popping up, right? So this Kava guy from Hihifo, he's like, yeah, let's take Tupo Malohi and them, and yeah, they abandoned Nualofa when Fina. But you can't hold that against Tupo Malohi, right? Because if somebody rolled up and it's just bamboo walls, which is powerful enough for spears and arrows, you can't hate on Tupo Malohi for bouncing out the back when somebody shows up with cannons and muskets. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it would have been a more noble thing for him to die there and get killed there with his people, right? Because what are you leaving? You're the leader, right? You can't abandon ship if you're the captain, right? Just like on any a sinking ship movie that I've seen, like The Perfect Storm or what is that one? The Titanic, right? The captain just stayed on board. He wasn't going to abandon his ship. That's his responsibility. If it goes down, he goes down with it, right? So yeah, you look at Tupo Malohi at this point, and it's like he's an abandoned ship type captain. But at the same time, him and his guys, they got good training from Fiji. All right, Godox. What's up, Big Wig, Mike L? At least he wasn't white. Raiders are trash. Yeah, I got all these football teams in here for everybody that's in the Kava club in here. There's a Cowboys, a Frisco, a Chiefs. There's Trump stuff. There's Tonga. There's all, and I just happened to be sitting right here in front of the Raiders because I had a black shirt on, so it'd be all matching, right? Color coordinate this chapter, right? All right, Kava, finding that no enemy thought proper to attack him, resolved to lay siege to the garrison of Nukunuku. Nukunuku is in Hihifo. Kava is feeling tough and feeling brave, especially now that he's got the help of Tupo Malohi, Tupo Toa's older brother, because Tupo Malohi used to run Nualofa. Now Kava's like, oh, let's take these guys. Let's go take Nukunuku. And I know where Nukunuku is. I've been to Nukunuku because it's up the street. What would that be? Northwest or it would be north something, probably northwest of Matahau, where we lived when I was a kid. I haven't been back since, but I know where Nukunuku is. He was successful in his attack and took it with an inconsiderable loss of men. Which being done, he determined, contrary to the advice of his Matapules, to garrison both fortresses. So basically, his Matapules told him, don't take Nukunuku and build a fort here. We got one already, and we're in Hihifo. We got one. Let's leave the Nukunuku fortress alone. But it seems like Teava was like, nah, let's have two home bases here in wherever he is in Hihifo and in Nukunuku. The reason the Matapules gave for objecting to this measure was the readiness with which the enemy made their retreat. This, they thought, argued an intention of returning speedily with fresh strength. Ambition blinded him, however, to his own proper interest. He neglected sage counsel and, dividing his forces, reserved the choicest half, including Tupo Malohi and his warriors and his own personal safety, in the garrison of Nukunuku, and commissioned the rest to defend Hihifo. So this is what we're looking at here. And it's the Matapules were right. Because the Matapules are saying, oh snap, these guys got out pretty quick at Nukunuku. We came to take it, and they escaped pretty fast. That only means one thing. They were ready. They were ready to escape, which means they're ready to come back. That's what the Matapules and the warriors are telling Kava. Like, they're probably ready somewhere. Kava says, nah, because Kava got greedy. It's like, we own this now. Having said that, he had to divide his forces from where he was in Hihifo and divide it, half of it with Nukunuku. Now he's split in half. And him and his guys and Tupo Malohi's guys stayed in Nukunuku. And it already sounds morbid. The story's about to turn. In the course of the following night, the enemy made a desperate attack on them. There you go. So that night, or the next few nights, let's say the following night, the next night, the enemies, so Nukunuku guys came back at night. Here we go. Having resolved to burn the place to the ground, they had appointed 400 men to effect their purpose, each of whom was armed with a spear, and a lighted torch fixed at about a foot from the point of it. At a signal, every man threw his flame weapon at the fencing or into the garrison, and by the aid of this new invention, the place was set on fire at several points at the same time. I imagine I have an uncle. He told me this war type story, kind of similar to this, where he went to, I think he went to Toroa. These are two high schools, right? Where the boys always fight. And they got in a fight at a rugby game, but later on the day after it was all said and done, his school in Toroa, the boys got together, put shirts around their faces and making it look like ninjas and stuff, and then they ran through to go to Atere, right? To go and attack them at night. This is recently, like in the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years. And he said they were all dressed like ninjas. They all ran in there and at night, and they went and attacked them. Like they're still doing it these days. When same thing what their ancestors were doing back in the day, was attacking each other at night when they weren't ready. So the Nukunuku guys come back and they're lighting all of Nukunuku on fire. Remember back then, and Mariner made a statement as he witnessed that villages today are just villages. You drive around in the streets and the roads and stuff, and you run into villages. But Mariner said back then, where the roads are and everything, if you get to you get to the next village because there are tall, giant bamboos that surround the entire village. Every village was ready, set for war already. The walls and the platforms up high, and guys with spears and guys with bow and arrows up top and inside, and big giant doors, gates, and everything. So this was, what, 200 years ago? Because we're talking about 1806, 1807, right? So these guys were always ready. Once Tupo George the First basically made a treaty with England for England to protect them, they basically said, okay, there is no more war. England's got my back, and there's nothing. And then eventually, none of those fences disappeared, the forts disappeared, how they set it up, basically at peace. And I think I'm thinking about it and knowing the importance of Tupo the First. If it wasn't for him, who knows how long it would have lasted, where every village that you drive up to has bamboo fencing around it, tall enough, and warriors all about. Who knows how long that would have lasted, right? So that's how all of the kolos used to look back then. Okay. With the view of rendering themselves more secure, the besieged had removed all the drawbridges over the dry ditch round the fencing except one. There was no ready means of escape, therefore, from the conflagration, which soon spread far and wide, except by one narrow path, and hundreds, consequently, were compelled to leap into the ditch, the sides of which were too steep to climb. Among these was Kava, the chief himself, who, with several other great chiefs and warriors, managed to get out by climbing up the backs of those whose fidelity at the utmost peril of their own lives prompted them to lend their superiors this friendly assistance. So also, not only was the giant bamboo walls all around each village back then, but remember how we described the giant ditches down below? So when you go up to a village, you can't just go up. There's drawbridges that drop, and you can walk across those. So Nukunuku guys are burning the entire town of Nukunuku, and the drawbridges, all of them are burned except for this one. But for the most part, everybody has to jump into the ditch and jump back out. But Mariner is saying it's too steep, you couldn't, and too high. You couldn't just jump out or climb out. He's saying the Teava and his guys had to climb up on top of people to get out of there. Which some guys, the loyal, noble guys, like, hey, you guys are our kings, you guys are our chiefs here, well, let's lift you up, and they lift them out, saying to their own peril. So whether they got burned or whether they got killed afterwards, that is yet to be seen. But we see also the behaviors there, right? And their allegiance and loyalty to their chiefs. Teava, having got out of the ditch, was now making the best of his way, unarmed, to Hihifo, when he was met by a native Fiji belonging to the enemy party, who gave him the watchword, which he was unable to answer. Oh, snap. Finau had Fijians over there. He had Hamoa guys over there, right? They in their own crew, right? Teava probably had Fijians. They had Hawaiians over there too. But Teukava's enemies, the guys in Nukunuku, they had their own Fijians because the Fijian guy came up and said, "What's the secret password?" And Teukava's like, he's unarmed, and he's like, "Please," or something, right? And the Fijian was probably like, "Sorry, buddy. Make." Instantly, the Fiji warrior struck him so violent a blow on the head with his club that he buried it in his brains. Don't mess with the Fijians, bro. You know what I mean? Toso viti on that one. You know what I'm saying? Because it's obvious the Fijians were, because they were savage. The last chapter we talked about how ruthless and savage they were. They were freaking barbecuing 200 bodies like they would pork, pigs. And they all ate heartily. They were in Fiji, right? Kaumoala was there. You know what I'm saying? And now this Fijian came and asked freaking Teukava for the secret password. He couldn't give it. So he buried, this Fijian guy buried his club into Teukava's head. The club had got so locked into the broken skull that he could not immediately withdraw it. And he probably would have left it there, but discovering what a great chief he had killed, his club, we presume, from that moment appeared exceedingly valuable. Bro, you just buried your club in Teukava's head. Now we can sell it on eBay. It's a high valued club now, right? That's what he's saying. From that moment appeared exceedingly valuable, the pledge, as it were, of fortune for future greatness. Oh, it's also a blessing to their warriors to have something buried in a chief's head. The triumph of his feelings, therefore, prevented him from seeing or hearing another man who was fast approaching, and while he was in the act of disengaging his weapon, his own brains were knocked out, and his speculations as suddenly destroyed by one of Teukava's men, whose swiftness of foot brought him just in time to revenge his fallen chief by laying his enemy prostrate by his side. Prostrate, he's down, faced up. So the Fijian guy comes out with his club and he says, "What's the secret password?" Teukava couldn't give it to him, so the Fijian guy buries his club into Teukava's head, right? And through it's so hard that it was hard to pull it out of Teukava's head, right? The Fijian standing there like pulling it out at the same time, knowing that the custom is now his club is worth something very high value because he just buried it in the chief's head, and his focus on that distracted him from the guy coming behind Teukava, moving really fast. And while he was pulling his club out of Teukava's head, one of Teukava's guys buries one in his, right? Fijian. Now you have a Tongan chief and a Fijian warrior laying right next to each other without brains, right? They're laying there. He said he was laying prostrate. Prostrate is up, right? Because supine is down. Prostrate is up, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody, Okay. But dangers were thickening round his warrior, and he was compelled to leave the body of Kava on the field and secure his own existence by speedy flight to Hihifo. So this guy that just killed the Fijian guy, he's out. He's got to be out. He can't carry a body while he goes. There's people on his back. Where all who succeeded in making their escape quickly arrived, the body of Kava was soon found by the enemy. It was conveyed to their fortress, cut into pieces, and, must it again be said, dressed for food. Kava means prepare kava, or the kava preparer, right? Now his body is being prepared for food, right? Now his body is teu me'akai, right? They about to teu tunu, teu kava. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, the Nukunuku guys weren't playing. Among the garrison of Hihifo was a chief named Ata, who had great reputation for political wisdom and military skill. I think the Ata is a nobleman or the king today, or a prince or something today, 2025. So Ata is an old name. Tupo is an old name that still exists today, right? Finau, old name. Ulukalala, Tukuaho, all these names from the early 1800s and early to mid 1700s were leaders even back then. They are the ones in possession of the throne today. Ata, with military skill, was a native of the island, and at the time of the revolution, when his friends and acquaintances went over to the Hawaii Islands for peace and safety, he resolved to remain for the sake of the oldest and most sincere friend, Kava. Oh. So Ata's homeboy is Kava. Now it's about to be trouble, right? Because Ata's family escaped to Hawaii to go find peace when the Tonga Islands, Tonga Tapu was at war with each other, the garrisons and war and stuff. Ata didn't go to, it says right here, Ata didn't go to find peace and refuge anywhere else in the Hawaii Islands for safety, because for the sake of his oldest and most sincere friend, Kava, and to assist and stand by him to the last. See, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I mean when we talk about loyalty and friendship and allegiance. His family's gone, but at the same time, like, there's something about, it's the intention, the deep, and I think Fata Maiki is an element, is a primary element of this. You're loyal, yeah, you're loyal. Love is a primary element, all of this. But for you to just allow your whether your siblings, because anytime we talk about chiefs and the people around them, we're talking about a group of chiefs and Amatapudas and Akis and all of that. And we're talking about Ata had to be part of the family, right? These are all family members fighting each other, right? Whether it's Finau and Tupo Niwa, Tupo To'a and Tupo Niwa, Finau Ulukalala, and Tukuaho, like, these are all family members, right? There's so many descriptions of them being related. Even the Tupo To'a helping Finau Ulukalala, but Tupo Malohi had control of Nualofa, and Finau Ulukalala attacked Nualofa, even though Tupo Malohi is Tupo To'a's older brother. You know what I'm saying? So he wouldn't leave his Ata, whoever this Ata guy is, he would not leave Kava's side because that's his homeboy. And you would only understand that and know that, just like how the Tongans viewed the Fijians so highly because of the maxima of the Fijians and the warlike behaviors of the Fijians, so much that it seemed like, even though they were related to most of the Polynesian islands and everything, it seems like the Fijians were their homies. They were their homeboys. And if you see right here, Kava was hit by a Fijian. Kava was killed by a Fijian. Even though another Tongan guy from Hihifo came and took that Fijian out, but even Finau Ulukalala had Fijians. He had Ha'amoa guys, he had even Palangis and Hawaiian guys over there. So there's a lot of things to be said and connected to as far as their connection, as it doesn't matter which island they came from. It matters which chief they were with, right? But they are all related somehow. So I give it up to Ata to stay behind and help his dear friend Kava. As Teava was now no more Ata, conscious of his skill in war and the confidence which all men placed in him, proposed to take upon himself the command of the garrison, and his offers were gladly accepted. So Ata came over and said, Teava's gone, I'll come and take over, right? No different from like any mobsters in the 5 boroughs in New York. Once a boss gets whacked or he's gone, another boss replaces him, right? And as far as this is concerned, Ata saying, I'm going to take this over from my friend, Teava. And we already know how Teava was, right? Teava is the guy that trained that bird, the Galai. Trained it. He was the best one in all of Hihifo, right? And then Finau Ulukalala asked for that Galai. What's his name? Teava prepared 2 other good Galais, sent it up to Finau, and then Finau had to come in and said, nah, I want your chief Galai, your good bird, right? In which he gave it to him. But anyway, Ata is now over here in possession of Hihifo now. And everybody accepted that. The other garrisons of the island, soon hearing of the death of Teava and the great losses he had sustained, several of them entered into a league against Hihifo and shortly commenced a siege, which lasted 14 days. But at length, quarreling among themselves and finding the besieged hold out so manfully, and withal being struck with awful astonishment at the extraordinary bravery of Makapapa. What's Makapapa doing over here? I thought he was in freaking what's it called? Vava'u. Makapapa's here, y'all. Remember Makapapa? He was the gangster from Vava'u. It will be recollected Makapapa was formerly in the service of Toi'umu. Toi'umu was the chief of Vava'u. Toi'umu is a lady who's Finau Ulukalala's aunt. But at the peace, he left Vava'u, apprehensive that Finau might play him some treachery. Okay, so Makapapa was in the war between, he was on the Feretoa side, so Makapapa is an original Vava'u guy, where Finau and his guys are original Hapai guys, but Makapapa, after Finau took over, Makapapa left because he knew what was going to happen. It seemed like he was conscious of the fact that if I don't leave, something's bad going to happen, which it did, right? Because we learned about Poponu, Kakahu, Naufahu, how Finau Ulukalala sunk him in a canoe, scuttled him down below, who was said to be invincible by the immediate protection of the gods. They raised the siege, and each party repaired as quickly as possible to its own fortress, lest it should be taken possession of by some enemy. So this is no different from any property or any real estate or any business, right? The black market underground businesses. If somebody gets taken out, then a lot of the people are going to come and take claim to that place, right? So Teava gets taken out. Now all these different fortresses in Tonga attack Hihifo. They get together, attack Hihifo, but they're surprised because the Hihifo guys are tough. They're strong. They hold Hihifo strong. And we're talking about the Tupo Malohi's guys from Nualofa. We're talking about the Fijian guys from Fiji, whoever their friends were, and the Hihifo guys themselves. They were all ready. But it seemed like as soon as a chief falls, the other villages, they man up and they all go, let's go take this village and then let's split the plunderings and the profits, right? But they were all surprised. And I can see what it looks like if the Matahau guys went over there, or the Fa'ui guys, or whoever else, depending on where exactly the place of Hihifo is, because I know he does pinpoint Nukunuku, but they all ganged up on wherever this Hihifo where Teava was. But they also got Makapapa, so some Vava'u guys, and Naata, some other Tonga Tapu guys. So damn, whew, so many teaming up of different spots, but they held strong. The Hihifo guys held strong, and none of the other villages can come take it. So then they all went back to their own villages, right? They couldn't plunder. No plundering today. During the siege of Hihifo, the women made themselves remarkable by their resolute assistance in the defense of the place, lest for want of men it should be taken by the enemy. Bro, what are you saying? You know what I mean? Well, what he's saying is the women, they nutted up too. They freaking balled up and freaking grabbed, because they're worried that their men, they're going to be missing men. If we don't protect our men or, help them, they're going to be missing men. So the women started arming themselves for war, and they jumped in with them, right? The widows of Teava, however, were so afflicted at his loss that many of them, it is said, strangled themselves. We've already went through the Fijian custom, right? The first wife of a Fijian man, and it was noble, right? Because this happened in Vava'u. When the Fijian chief died in Vava'u, his wife offered, like, she said, no, this is our custom. I'm not, he's not going to die by himself. I'm going to die by his side. And then she had two other Fijian guys wrap a ngatu around her neck and choke her to death, and then she laid right next to her husband, because it was the Fijian custom. No matter what, you weren't changing her mind. She was crying and she was whatever, but she was not going to leave her husband's side. It was customary for them to do that, right? And it seemed like Tonga had some of those customs also. If their chief died, or their husband, and their husbands were high chiefs, they weren't going to marry down. Right? Customarily, if our chief is dead, then yeah, they started hanging themselves. This is right here. The widows of Teava, the widows, plural, however, were so afflicted at his loss that many of them, it is said, strangled themselves. All right. Now we're gonna read the the footnote here. Speaking of Teava, calls to mind a circumstance mentioned in the second missionary voyage respecting Eliza Mosy and a black woman, both belonging to the American ship Duke of Portland, Captain Lovat Mellon. The date is not mentioned. Through the treachery of Teava, oh snap, who from mistake of pronunciation they called Dukava, so they called him Dukava. All right, so there was a ship that was in Tonga, an American ship, Captain Mellon. They died at the hands of Teava. The crew were all murdered, excepting 3 or 4 persons, among whom were Eliza Mosy and the black woman. The latter, the black woman, was still at the Hapai Islands when Mr. Mariner left. Oh, snap. She had become insane, but lived as sort of a domestic being, harmless, with a certain female chief who treated her kindly. Eliza Mosy became one of the wives of Teava. A Palangi lady on an American ship became a wife of Teava. After Teava, killed whoever was on that ship, who was much envied by the other chiefs on that account, she being a white woman. There you go. Remember all that? How a lot of the chiefs back then, even when I was talking about how in the Mutiny on the Bounty movies, how the Tahitians were telling the white men to basically have kids with their women because they thought it was a blessing. They thought it was a gift from God, right? If that happened, right? These guys in Tonga were the same way. And if you watched Other Side of Heaven, it was like that too. Some Tongan girl tried to seduce Koripoki to have a child, because the mentality was the same thing. As long as it's a light-skinned or a white baby, or you have a child of that, of that person or country or color, it was a gift from God, or it's superior. They're going to be superior. Anyway, that's how it was. Eliza Mosy, one of the wives of Teava, who was much envied by the other chiefs, on that account, she being a white woman, she made her escape afterwards in the Union of New York and arrived at Port Jackson, where she remained. Mr. Mariner has since accidentally heard from a woman who had been at Port Jackson that Eliza Mosy returned afterwards to Tonga with a ship that went for the purpose of laying in a cargo of pork, and was shortly afterwards wrecked among the Fiji Islands. we hear a lot of wrecks, right? And if you go to Tonga, there's some places where there's wrecked ships just sticking out of the ocean in the more shallow parts. But there's a lot of wrecks. It says right here that this Eliza Mosy showed up on an American ship. Everybody got whacked. She was made as Kava's wife, right? And eventually she ran away, went back to Port Jackson, which is somewhere in England. But it says that she did come back. She came back, returned afterwards to Tonga with the ship that went for the purpose of laying on a cargo of pork. But that ship eventually wrecked in Fiji, one of the Fiji islands. Anyways, there you go. The travel is common, right? The ships, the canoes, whatever else they're traveling, they move around so much. It's no surprise that you would end up in Fiji, or Fijians would end up in Tonga, or the Hawaiians, or the Hamoa guys. Like, that's how common the movement of ships were back then, right? Now it's airplanes, and ships still move now, and a lot bigger ones and so forth. But I'm just trying to describe how common it is for ships to be moving around back then, and for people to end up on different islands also. Tupo Malohi now sent word to his brother Tupo To'a that, being weary of his unquiet and harassing life at Tonga, and being desirous to settle at Hapai, he wished his brother to petition the king in his behalf and to obtain leave for himself and his chiefs and Matapulas to reside at Hapai and be henceforth tributary to him, which message was brought to Tupo To'a by a chief and 2 young Matapulas, as before stated. So this entire chapter started with the reason why these 2 Matapulas went to Hapai, to tell Tupo To'a. Tupo To'a, your brother, Tupo Malohi, he's in Tonga right now. They're getting attacked and so forth. He wants to come and stay in Hapai with you and become a tributary chief to Finau. But you've got to go to Vava'u and ask Finau to forgive your older brother and give him pardon so that he can come and stay with you here in Hapai. Having communicated this request of his brother and his followers to Finau, after a little consideration, the king gave consent that they should reside at the Hapai Islands. Yeah, sure. Yeah, tell the Tupo Malohi and them come to Hapai. Yeah, for sure. Right? Finau's cool. Upon condition that Tupo To'a kept a strict eye upon their conduct and was unanswerable for them, which was immediately agreed to. Now, Tupo Malohi's running again. We just read earlier how he was the guy running Nualofa when Mariner and those guys went over there with the cannons and the guns. He went to another village. They kicked him out. They didn't like him. He had to go to a third village, right? And now he ends up here in Hihifo with Ata and Kava, the real gangsters. And now they're going to war. And then Tupo Malohi's like, hey, go tell my brother in Hapai, who's good friends. I mean, we're all related to Finau, but tell him that I want to come over there. He's retreating again. Tupo Malohi seems like cowardly. You know what I'm saying? He should have died in Nualofa with his people. He should have went down the ship then. But he's running away again, finding a new place to stay because it seems that's what I'm saying. He sounds like Fredo from The Godfather, running, you know, never owning up to nothing, never just being gangstering himself for any reason or for any cause of anything. So that's where we're at right now. Let's see, where were we? Tupo To'a thereupon got ready a large canoe and proceeded to Hihifo to receive his brother, who came on board with all his chiefs and choice warriors, the remainder of his attendants following in another canoe. Having touched in their way at the Hapai Islands, they proceeded on to Vava'u to pay their respects to Finau and to receive his pardon. Tupo To'a had to go himself to go get his older brother, Tupo Malohi, on a giant, it says a giant canoe, a giant ship, giant canoe, because somebody complained about me saying, stop saying canoe. Well, this is what they're saying. That's what I'm saying. It says right here, Tupo thereupon got ready a large canoe. So it is a ship. Like if you want to be in context or you want to be, split hairs on this, okay, it's a ship because it's two giant canoes put together, platform and everything. And then it says right here, his attendants were in a different canoe. When I say attendants, we're talking about other women who were considered wives, right? Or women that were, well, they're all considered wives. If you're anywhere near a man, you're his attendants, and he basically procreates with all of them, right? That seems common because any travel, if you've throughout the past chapters, if you've heard me say attendants, it was that guy and his many wives and children and so forth. And I've given some of that in detail earlier in the book as far as the polygamy. They lived polygamy, they had plural marriage, whatever you want to call it, but there was no Christian ceremony. It seemed like they were all covenanted to each other, and then the property had 4 or 5 houses, and each wife with their children stayed at each house. And Finau himself, when we're describing him, he was with the main wife in the main house, and so on and so forth. And he would go, they would all get up together and be together. But as far as conjugal visiting or conjugal, relations, they would do that, on their own time as they saw fit personally. Soon as the king heard of their arrival, he replied with all his chiefs and matapodes to the house on the Malae at Neiafu, having besides their usual dress, small mats round the middle, significant of its being a solemn occasion, and out of respect for Tupo Malohi, although he became as an humble suppliant, for he was a very great chief. Tupo Malohi was a very great chief, maybe by blood, maybe by relation, but by action, I don't think they saw him like that, especially since they treated him bad, and he had to leave the second village he got to. And now he's at 4th, 1, 2, 3. Hihifo was the 4th, and now he's in his 5th place because he's been retreating this whole time. For he was very great chief, superior even to Tupo, being his elder brother. Right? So Fredo is older than Michael, but Michael was the gangsta. Michael was the boss. Anyway, I'd hate to compare the two, but that's all I see in my mind is somebody who can't stand their ground and, step foot on anywhere and be respected like that. It's hard for me. But yeah, based on the culture itself, he is a higher chief because he's older than Tupo Toa. Tupo Toa had Tupo George the First, and so this is Tupo King George Tupo's uncle, Tupo Malohi. Tupo Malohi, being informed that the king was already seated on the Malae, ready to receive him, he and his followers, dressed in large mats, expressive of their great respect, with leaves of Ifi tree round about their necks, in mark of submission, went forth accompanied by a priest to a house dedicated to Tariai Tupo and sat down before it. Tariai Tupo is a god. We went through a list of gods. Tariai Tupo is one of the gods. The priest then addressed the divine spirit that was supposed to reside there to the following purpose. So that's the religion. But now they're in Neiafu. They're in Vava'u. Tupo Toa brought his brother. Tupo Malo is there. They set it up just like a religious ceremony. Everybody had the Ifi leaves, necklace, and the ta'ovala and everything. And remember, you can't kill anybody if they're dressed like this. That's because they're superstitious. It's a religious thing to them. Now the priest is speaking. You always want to walk around with a priest when you're going to go ask for forgiveness or ask for pardon. You want to walk around with a priest dressed this way so that whoever it is, a king, a chief, or whatever, doesn't kill you because it's against the religion for them to do any harm to you dressed this way. So the priest speaks out in the place of God, basically. Here thou seest the men who have come from Tonga to implore thy pardon for their crimes. They have been rebels against those chiefs who hold power from the divine authority, But being sorry for what they have done, they hope that thou wilt be pleased for the future to extend thy protection towards them. The priest then rose up and laid a piece of kava root under the eaves of the house, after which he proceeded towards Finau to the suppliants following him, one after another in the order of their rank, their heads bowed down and their hands clasped before them. We kind of talked about how when they're meeting, like just to make sure that they know that they're there for peacefully, you sit down with your legs crossed and your hands clasped like this, down, and your head down, with your weapon outside or your weapon somewhere else, so that they know that, I come in peace. And I'm showing you I'm coming in peace so much that I'm not ready for war or anything. My head's bowed, my hands are clasped, my legs are crossed, my weapon's outside. And so I'm at your, discretion. Anything you think you want to do to me, it's either we end this in peace or you end me right now. That's why the whole situation, as far as the body language is concerned. Entering the house on the side opposite the king, right? They're in a house. The mala'e, we talked about the mala'e. It's a green, like a field. And there's a house there for these purposes, for the fondos. And the field is like, if you're at a stadium, there's a house, which is the stage. And then the crowd sits on the green and hear the chief or hear the king or whoever speaking. And they did a lot of ceremonies on the mala'es, whether it's on Niafu or Tonga Tapu. There's mala'es everywhere. They also call cemetery mala'es, but they were calling it, for the most part, faitokas, right? Which is cemetery in proper Tongan. Okay. Entering the house on the side opposite the king, they seated themselves before him, his matapules, and their hands still clasped together, and their heads bowed down almost to the ground. After a little time, the priest who sat between them and the king addressed the latter to the following purpose. You here see Tupo Malohi and his chiefs and followers who have been to implore the pardon of Taliai Tupo and are now come to humiliate themselves before you, or humble themselves, now that they expect you will pardon them after so obstinate a rebellion. But they come to endeavor to convince you of their sorrow for so great and heinous a crime. They have no expectation but to die. Therefore, your will be done. There you go. And usually when you go, like, whether it's a funeral or how they walk around at these ceremonies, everybody usually walks all down, almost hunched down, head down and everything, in sign of respect. Because, and this one time we were at basically me and my pops went somewhere, and a lady walks in, and I stand up because it was for work, right? And he sat down, but then he goes on to say, excuse me, culturally, we wouldn't stand above somebody. But, in the American culture, no, if somebody walks in, you stand up to show your respect. And he was describing that because, she came, shook his hand, shook mine. And I was like, this guy's sitting for. But then he made that remark, and I was like, oh, cool. I also noticed that she was cute. So I was like, is my pops trying to holler, trying to, impress this chick? Which is, all right, I get it. We're Kava guys, it's whatever. Okay, pops. But anyways, that's how you walk and sit, hunched down and so forth, to show humility. Lower than the other person. And that's in the Kava circle too. Like, a lot of guys don't like the chairs in the Kava when you go drink Kava because they like it the old way. They're all, down close to the ground. It feels humbling. It feels more, it feels right to them, which, yeah, right? But if we all agree that chairs are cool, then, let's sit in chairs, all sit in chairs together. We stay on the same level when we're sitting up high too. We're always on the same level, right? And besides, like, if our ancestors had these nice chairs, bro, my ancestors would be sitting like a mug on these chairs, bro, and be like, "Shit, mug, we from Kava, cuz." You know what I mean? So I don't doubt that at all. But to each his own. But to die, therefore, your will be done. So he's telling Finau, Tupo Malohi is ready to die, it's whatever. Okay, this speech of the priests is to be considered more a matter of form than the real sentiments of the suppliants. So basically he's saying, he's just saying, right? The priest is saying, all right, I'm just saying, we're just saying, like, they didn't really expect to die, but it is one of those, formal things that you express to let them know, hey, man, if it is what it is and it's got to be what it's got to be, yeah. But it's basically to show, hey, I'm here, we're here to humble ourselves before you. After a short pause, the priest added, pass your sentence, Finau. He then rose up and retired among the people. In a little time, Finau said to the supplicants, Tukwa hello wifi. Take off the ifi leaves, which is a sign of pardon, of which command they took no notice, as if unwilling to believe so great a mercy was shown to them. Oh. Okay. Take off the ifi leaves, which is a sign of pardon, of which command they took no notice, as if unwilling. So it's like it's a humility thing, right? Tonga is always growing up, always hear from anybody. My uncles, my grandparents, my aunties, anywhere, my parents. It's always put yourself below somebody, right? Beneath them. Because it's good for you, it's good for the relationship, it's good. And not only that, if you are used to being humble, you'll never be surprised. It's the guys that are up, right? It's the guys that are throwing flurries at the boxer in the ring, in the corner, and this guy right here, eventually he's gonna throw a punch, and the flurry guy gets surprised. So it could be for a few different things. It could be behavior. It's part of the culture. It's because the gods are pleased with it. But there's so many reasons and definitions of why you always want to bring yourself down, and for the most part, so that you stay ready, at any given time. But yeah, for humility purposes too. Like, that's true. That is actually sincere. The humility part of the whole thing is sincere. So Finau is saying, all right, guys, like, take off the ifi leaves. You guys are good. Take the ifi leaves off, right? Because to them, the ifi leaves shows their humility. And Finau saying, but they sit there, and I can see this too, because this happens often in many situations. They sit there and they don't even touch the leaves. They'll sit there, right? Just to, even though they're grateful and they're good. And Finau said, all right, you guys can take the humility leaves off. They'll just sit there and not move. Finau again said, Tukwai lo wifi, upon which they all complied, but remained in the same posture. So they all take off their ifi necklaces, right? It's like, all right, Tukwai lo wifi, like, forget about it already. Let's forget about it. I mean it. I forgive you guys, basically. Before we go further, it must be observed that there were vacant places left among Finau's chiefs and Mataapules for Tupo Malohi and his principal followers, who were of sufficient rank to be called to them after they have received their pardon. But for a great chief circumstanced, as was Tupo Malohi, to obey this summons, which is always pronounced by the Mataapules sitting next to Finau, would neither be so respectful nor so prudent as to remain where he was, and take no notice of it, as if together unworthy of being so exalted. So Finau sitting here, and there are a couple spots for the high chief people that amongst Tupo Malohi's guys, because Finau obviously knows these are Tupos. These are Tukuao's kids, right? Or nieces or nephews or whatever. So of course they have high calling, and there are some spots next to Finau that were left open on purpose, so that after this whole ceremony of pardoning, during the war battles and stuff, he's gonna call them up. All right, take your place. We're good. While a chief of less noble rank would not hesitate to obey the command and take the seat appointed for him. So the hesitation of them taking their places, or the hesitation of them taking the necklaces of peace off, the hesitation was a sign of humility. Like, no, that's cool. I'll wear it. Like, I'm humble. I'm humiliated, whatever. But Finau said, for the second time, said, "Nualofa," and they were like, and they didn't move. They were just sitting there. And then he sat, looked around, and he's like, "Nualofa." And then they take off the, like, okay, fine. One of those things, they're playing it or acting a part or whatever. And he's saying that he did the same thing as far as, come take your places up front where you belong. And none of them moved. They just sat there, and he's going to do it for the second time. And it's all, even though it's all play, but it is still them showing each other how humble they're willing to be. All this is done upon the principle that the great chief, so offending, ought to keep himself as humble as possible, lest having great power and authority, he might be suspected of intentions to equalize himself with his superiors and ultimately revolt. Whereas minor chiefs, having but little power, are not liable to excite jealousies. Okay. The reason why he's hesitating to come take his spot when he's told, even though he's a higher chief and he shouldn't hesitate, is for them to make sure for that guy, the high chief guy, Tupo Malohi, even though he's higher than Finau in the government of Tonga, he's going to show Finau, no, it's up to you, right? Like, I'll sit here humbly. Like, I don't have to sit next to you, but just to make sure that I have no intentions of attacking you at all. And just knowing Tupo Malohi and how he gave up Nualofa and got kicked out of different places, he isn't. Right? Fredo isn't going to attack. Anyways, so he would hesitate, right? They hesitate to remove it just to, if you really mean it, you'll tell me twice, right? I won't do it. I know you're saying it, but you're saying it. So you say it because I feel like you have to say it the first time, right? But if you really mean it, you'll say it the second time. Type mentality thing. And it's a play on each other. And they're all playing along. And Finau's telling him, all right, take off the ifi. No, they're sitting around. Take off the ifi, guys. It's okay. We're done. We're done with that. Now he's saying, all right, come take your places up front where you belong in the chiefdom of this thing of ours, right? And they don't do it immediately. But he said the lower chiefs, the one that have no threat of anything, they would come up immediately because they're being obedient. But the ones who are higher up, they're not going to move until they repeat that order. Just so that Finau, that the first time is you just saying it, and I'm willing to ignore that, and you continue on what you're trying to say and describe or whatever. But if you say it the second time, then I'll obey, because that means that you really mean it, right? So interesting mental gymnastics and mental combat, right? Very clever. All right. So this is Finau Ulukalala talking to Tupo Malohi and his guys and his chiefs. Besides which, these minor chiefs, being governed by the superior, are thought to be less criminal than he who leads them astray by his authority. So the lower chiefs would obey immediately because they know we ain't got, we don't run any armies, right? But the higher ups would hesitate until, told a few times. This formed a subject of dispute beforehand among the company. There was a dispute before, so before all this happened, there was a dispute, y'all. He's about to spill the tea. Some thought that Tupo Malohi would instantly obey the order to take his appointed seat. Oh, so they were betting. Man, I bet you freaking Tupo Malohi goes up there immediately and just starts sitting right in his spot right, next to Finau, right? Conscious of his exalted rank and fearless of the jealousy of Finau. That's not Tupo Malohi, bro. Nah, Tupo Malohi's not fearless. I've heard enough of Tupo Malohi to know that, he's going to hesitate. But the bet was, I bet you, before all this happened, I bet the guys were basically betting. I bet you anything, Tupo Malohi goes on the first call, and some are saying, nah. It's like, yeah, he's going on the first call because he's fearless. He doesn't care about Finau, give a damn. Some guys are saying, nah, he'll show true form of humility, right? The greater part, so most of them, however, were of opinion that he would remain where he was, knowing well the revengeful disposition of the Hau. Remember, Hau means champion, right? Sometimes it is a family that takes over, and sometimes it's the Akis, depending on religion, as far as ownership of property. And sometimes it's a Hau. It's a guy who takes possession of property through military action, right? And they're calling him a Hau, a champion. Most of them thought that the Hau, or that Tupo Malohi is going to respect the Hau, or in other words, Finau Ulukalala, and his promptitude to sacrifice those whom he suspected. So basically, say, Tupo Malohi know what's up. He's heard the stories. He's heard the goals. He knows what's cracking. He knows what's happening. Like, he was in Tonga and Hihifo, but he's heard of Finau. He's heard of us. He knows what's happening. He's gonna do it. He's gonna play the part right, and come up on the second or third call up. In a little time, this matter was put out of dispute. The matapure on Finau's right hand exclaimed aloud, "Tupo Malohi, here is a place for you." Okay, so this Finau sitting, and the matapure to his right. He's the one that makes all the calls, because Finau shouldn't, right? He should. That's why he gave the matapure the responsibility to do so that a chief isn't telling a chief what to do, but a matapure is requesting it from a higher up person, and that was common too. All the chiefs, or the kings and the high chiefs, they wouldn't say it themselves. They would give their responsibility to a matapure in a requesting form, right? So that it's not me commanding another chief, right? So the matapure says, Tupo Malohi, here's a place for you, right? Or whatever he says. The chief seemed not to hear the summons, keeping his head bowed to the earth. The matapure again, right? So Tupo Malohi, he wasn't about to get up on the first try. He wasn't about to get up on the first request. Nah, he played it right. He said it again. Tupo Malohi, here is a place for you. But his ears were still shut, and he preserved the same humble posture. So Tupo Malohi is sitting there for the second time, being called up, still legs crossed, hands clasped together, and head down, right? Maybe the leafy leaves are probably gone now, but in a humble position, because he wants to show Finau that, no, even though position-wise, as far as the chiefdom is concerned, I may be higher rank, but I want you to know that, no, you're the guy. So because I know that you're the guy, when you call me once, I'm not going to respond, because only a person with a high rank of mine, if I were to respond immediately, that would show you that I am higher rank. But no, this second time, nope, he's not even moving, right? The matapure then said to the others successively, mentioning their names in the order of their rank, here's a place for you. And they accordingly seated themselves as their names were called over in the places appointed for them. Those who were of sufficient rank to sit in the circle, the others retiring among the people. So remember, the circle is a big thing in this freaking culture, right? This is in the circle, the Knights of the Round Table, right? Finau sitting, the people are sitting, and then there's a circle being made for the chiefs. Those are the guys that are at the table. And there are places opened up for chiefs, and depending on the ranking, Tupo Malohi and everybody, and the matapure is telling everybody to take their place. Tupo Malohi is not moving, right? And that's his expression of humility. Like, nah, I'm gonna make sure. So if all these littler guys go take their places before me, this is gonna show Finau that no, I'm putting myself below them too. Even though I'm the highest ranking member, Tupo Malohi, and I'm supposed to take my place already. But I want to show Finau that no, I'm going to let the lower ranking guys take their places first, just so that you know that I'll be the last, but I'll be the first one here for you, right? Just to let you know, no. It's you, Finau, basically is what the indication to him. Leaving Tupo Malohi seated by himself in the middle of the ring, Kava was now prepared and served out to the company, each in his turn, according to his rank, not excepting Tupo Malohi, who, in this case, was served the fourth. So there you go. Anybody who's LDS, that's, if you pass out sacrament, it goes to the presiding people, usually first. Well, you could just go to the bishop and then everybody else, or whoever, the first ranking guy. That's interesting that they have this same pattern. Like, go to the highest ranking guy first. Take care of him first. Tupo Malohi was the fourth. So obviously went Finau. It probably went to Poto'a. It probably went to one of Finau's other guys from Hapai, or it may even have went to one of the Vava'u guys that were higher up, right? And in the second volume, it'll get in a lot more detail as to who's sitting where and who gets served first. The one thing that I have described before is if you are the guy at the bowl with the kava and the people in the back are chewing the kava and throwing it in the bowl and you follow it, the highest member would be across from the guys, from the to'a guy, basically. And then it goes lower ranking all the way around on each side so that those guys don't serve the lower guys. The lower guys will always serve all the way up to the higher guys, and the highest guy doesn't have to serve anybody, right? That's basically the gist of the Kava circle and how it is. The highest guys sit furthest away because they will not serve any of the lower ranking guys. Okay. Kava was served. Tupo Malohi was the fourth cup. When the kava was presented to him, he neither took it nor raised up his head, but speaking to somebody who sat a little behind him, that person stretched his arm forward and took it away, reserving it for Tupo Malohi to drink after the kava party should be dissolved. Now you can look at this two ways. Tupo Malohi's being a punk and a coward, or Tupo Malohi's showing his extreme humility. He's still in the same place. And he gets served the fourth cup of kava. Instead of him taking the kava, he's still focused on his humility. He's still focused on, no, I want Finau to know my position. I want Finau to know where I'm at. I'm not paying any attention to the kava. I'm not paying any attention to the seating of the ranking. I don't want to be involved in anything, but my focus is on Finau, and Finau's recognizing and realizing that my only focus is forgiveness, right? That's his whole point. And so when the kava comes to him, he doesn't even move. He just, give it to the guy behind me. He holds the cup till this is all done, and then he'll drink it then. But I came here, my purpose is to show Finau that, no, bro, I'm done. All I want is peace. I know how treacherous you are, Finau, is probably what he's thinking. So I want you to know that all this cultural and customary stuff that we have right here, I'm not even focused on that. All I'm focused is on being pardoned by you and me being humble before you, right? And you can see that, you can look at it in two different ways. And either from a cowardice point of view, like, dude, come on, man. Well, we get it. Like, Finau he's not going to call you a fourth time. He's called you twice already, or a third time. He's called you twice already, right? And you're still sitting there. Now you're the only one sitting in the middle of the circle. Everybody is taking their place. Like, we get it. You know what I'm saying? You're humble. Or you can look at it from the position of his main focus was humility. His main focus was forgiveness. His main focus was being pardoned, and he has no other agenda than to show Finau, yeah, I'm here for one reason only. That's to let you know that I'm about this. Man, no. The company, having finished their kava, dispersed, and Tupo Malohi retired to take his. This chief and his followers remained at Vava'u about a fortnight before they sailed to the Hapai Islands, during which time he entertained Finau with an account of different transactions at Tonga, relating what conspiracies had been devised, what battles had been fought, and brave chiefs and warriors had fallen. Every time he mentioned the death of a hero, Finau struck his breast with his fist, exclaiming, "What a warrior has fallen in a useless war," or something to that purpose. So Finau is sitting there hearing stories from Tupo Malohi. Tupo Malohi just telling stories about Hihifo, about Nukunuku, about Tonga Tapu, and everything that's going on there because he has a T, because he's a chief too, right? Which means they both know Ata. Ata's homeboy was Teukava. Teukava was killed by a Fijian. Like, they know this is how they pass around the information in the T, right? And every time Tupo Malohi mentions a great warrior that he knew or a chief that he knew, so I'm suspecting Teukava, Finau Ulukalala would strike himself. It's like, man, what a warrior he was. What a waste of warrior at a useless war, right? Waste of chief, waste of leader at a useless fight, useless battle, right? In Tongan. Mau money go fu hia go ya fu how fu whatever they call him, man. Fu matapure. Aonga na atamai na malohi na strong and mentally, you know, in his capacity, whatever, cerebral or whatever it was. Being very animated. It's an animated thing for him to do, and I'm sure that Tupo Malohi was being animated in his storytelling. Before Tupo Malohi and his chiefs took their departure, Finau repeated his orders to Tupo To'a to keep a watchful eye upon them and to give him the earliest information if he discovered any symptoms of conspiracy, for he said he expected something of the kind, as they were all choice warriors and had been well experienced at the Fiji Islands. See, freaking Finau even knew. But Tupo Malohi, even after Tupo Malohi did what he did, as far as he didn't move, he didn't take any kava, he sat in the middle of the circle while everybody sat in their positions. Even when he did that, which to me would have been, I don't know, would it have been enough for me to be off my guard? Finau was never off his guard, right? We've read the friggin' the past or what he's always been planning, he's always been plotting and scheming about against everybody, right? So even when they bounced, Tupo Malo, his younger brother, right, now in cahoots with Finau Ulukalala, Finau Ulukalala tells Tupo To'a, watch your brother. If you see any signs of conspiracy or treachery of anything, you let me know, right? Because Finau expects it nonetheless. They just sat down and freaking Tupo Malohi, he told them all the stories about what happened in Tonga, but that wasn't enough for Finau to drop his guard, right? Yeah. You ain't gonna catch him slipping, right? So these are freaking military-minded guys that had to be on their T's and dot your I's and P's and Q's, whatever, right? They had to be head on a swivel. You know what I'm saying? And Finau wasn't playing. He wasn't about to get caught. So that is Tupo To'a's brother. But for Finau to send him on his way, and while everybody was loading up, for Finau to tell Tupo To'a, hey, tokango towa, ka ilonga fi pakipe, eh? If he shows any sign of conspiracy, you let me know. Like, this is Tupo To'a's older brother. But Tupo To'a was Finau sure that Tupo To'a was that loyal to him, right? Because Tupo To'a has a son that's about to be the king of Tonga and unite all Tonga and, Otuama Tonga go to Futovia. That's Tupo To'a's son. Finau is telling him, watch your older brother or, we might just have to whack him. Finau's the boss. I'm the boss of the family, right? And it seems like the allegiances and, man, I don't even know. Finau was just a different animal. He caught Pupunu slipping. He caught Kakahu slipping. He caught freaking Naufahu and Tupo Niua. Like, Finau caught a lot of dudes slipping. So he always stayed, stayed sharp. But that's how treacherous that guy was. We've read how many times we've read through about him. He's tripping. He's always tripping. But anyway, might get got, not got. That's right. So, anyways, that was chapter 11, y'all. Shoot. So there's, what is that? Two more? Chapter 12. Man, I'm gonna enjoy freaking editing all this. Yep, two more chapters in the first volume, y'all. I'm gonna be in Utah. Shoot, I might just well do it out there because I'm leaving to Utah either tonight or tomorrow. Family reunion this weekend, family reunion next weekend in Utah. So I might just do it out there. I might just see y'all when I get out there. So, Ofaka Modolu, man. This story is crazy. I mean, look how long it's taking me to freaking reread this. I mean, I've read this a couple times already, but just to read it again is like, oh, snap. Forgot freaking all these details. And it's really crazy details. Cougs and Utes. Yup. Shoot. Ain't no cougar flag in here. Nope. No Utes flag. Nope. Shoot, we need to get some college up in here. We got NFL like we got NFL, family and friends up in there. You know what I mean? Of course, shoot, Apuika, nigga, that's my caution. Anyways, Ofaka Modolu, man. Hey, man, what a good chapter, huh? Yeah, I think I'm going to finish this there and start the second volume and continue moving forward. Anybody have any questions for anything else? Let me know, huh? Nah, no worries. Yup, let's see if there's any. You're one big Mexican. Favorite book is Sodomy, okay? Yes, but have you... Okay, I don't know what that is. Nope. Okay, hey, Kaudama. Don't get the... Tupoto is our ho'eki and our matapure is nga how. Hey, man. All these names I've heard recently, like Hala Api Api, the Pupunu. I've known the Pupunu for a long time. Anybody who's in Salt Lake and Utah, or anybody who knows Leo Pupunu, he's been everywhere. That's one of my brothers. He's one of my Teucavas, right? Remember, Ata took over for Teucava. He's a Teucava to me. One of my Teucavas. I have a few Teucavas. And shoot, I'm gonna call him that. Anybody who's that close to me, I'm gonna call him a Teucava. That's Teucava na aku, right? Anybody who knows this story knows that Ata didn't go with his family to retreat to Hapai. He stayed in Tongatapu in Hihifo just to make sure he can help his best friend Teucava. So anybody that's close to me, that's one of my big close homies, Teucava, right? Or like my boys in Salt Lake who work at the airport, my S1. That's my S1 right there, right? Shout out to the Dungeon and the Night's Watch. S1s, let's see. Yep, the Botoa. And a lot of people are related to these names. And when I heard these names recently, I was surprised that these names still were around. Not of Tupo and Finau, but to know the roots of those two names is amazing. But to find out that there's a Naufahus, I know now some Naufahus. I don't know, I've never met a Kakahu. I never met, what's his name? Dang, I keep on forgetting the king that they slayed. His name. Anyways. Okay, Gaudama. Ofaka Modol. We'll see you guys in Utah for chapter 12. We'll do 12 and 13 in Utah because I'll be there for like a week or two. So, Ofaka Modol. Till then, to all my Teucavas, Ovad.